Jnana Yoga usually focuses on this difference that I'm spirit and I'm not matter. So I'm not this and I'm not this and I'm not this, but I'm the spirit. So it usually differentiates the spirit from the matter all the time. That's one part of the process. That's why here Prakriti and Purusha are being described. And Krishna will also speak how the material nature, that is matter, and the living entities, which are spirit, they both are two different categories. And how is then, if they are such two different categories who don't actually go well with each other, by nature they are completely different, matter is inert and soul is conscious, how are they actually coming together? How is the superior spiritual soul is stuck in the material nature, which is lower or inferior in terms of quality? So how is it entangled? And that will be discussed in verse 22. And is it all just the matter and the living entities in this world? Seems like there is a third factor, the third hidden factor in this world, which is moving everything, which will be discussed in verse 23. And knowing all of this, why are we bothered about knowing about matter, knowing about spirit, and knowing about that hidden third factor? So, what does that, how does that help us? That is discussed in verse 24, that this knowledge, what is the result of this knowledge? And how do we realize this knowledge? What are the various ways we can realize? And if all these paths are so difficult, what is the most easiest way to realize this knowledge? So the first three verses explains the topic. Fourth verse speaks about the result of this topic. And fifth and sixth speaks about the process to realize this particular knowledge discussed between 20 and 23. So that's how this particular section is laid out. The first four verses speak about the very topic itself. They explain what is matter, what is prakriti, what is purusha, how are they interacting, what is the result of that interaction, and what is the hidden factor in this interaction. How is this interaction made possible? That is discussed in the first four verses. In the fifth verse, which is 24, the result of this knowledge. What is the use of understanding all this? It sounds so complicated. Why are we spending time in knowing these things? And that's being discussed in the fifth verse. And the sixth and the seventh verse speaks about how do we actually achieve this knowledge. So hope that's a little introduction to the topic and how it's going to flow. As usual, we get into this topic that why is Krishna speaking about these verses? What's the reason that Krishna is speaking about this particular set of verses in the order that he is? If you all remember, Krishna had asked 6 questions in the beginning. One of them, especially the first one. So basically, the first 2 questions that he asked was the Krishna is choosing to answer at the end. So it's because Arjuna asked. So Krishna answers Arjuna's question by explaining both what is material nature, which is prakriti. In general English, Prabhupada translates as material nature, which is not just this world, but the whole universe, the collection of all the universes, the whole material nature. What do you call it? The millions of universes that is coming out of Mahavishnu. So all of the material nature is being considered here. And the soul, the material nature and the soul are eternal. But the entanglement comes from the soul's association with matter. So Krishna is going to answer this. What is Prakriti and Purusha? So he is going to answer that question in this section. But we won't get into the detail because eventually we'll see when the verses come up. And he also introduces, it's not just about Prakriti and Purusha in this world. There is someone hidden, which is the Paramatma, who needs to be realized through this path of Jnana Yoga. Jnana means knowledge. So the real knowledge is to see the unseen. What's not usually, we can look at an X-ray, and probably if you're not medically trained, we cannot see or understand anything. But when a trained doctor looks at X-ray, he says, "Oh, here is a fracture, here is a hairline crack." So they can immediately spot it because they have been trained for that. So similarly, what is Jnana Yoga? Jnana Yoga is to train in knowledge, connect with the Supreme through the knowledge. So who's that Supreme? Where is that Supreme in the questions? And where is the Supreme in the answers? So that's why now Krishna introduces without having been even asked, because the word Purusha has 2 kinds of meanings. Any guess what does Purusha mean? You're not fully audible, Pravit. Maybe is it my problem?
Does it mean controller?
Controller, yes. It could also be taken as controller. And
I also wanted to say the same thing. But then Purusha is also the two types of Purusha, right? The one that the living entity as well as.
Okay, so I'm asking what is the translation to that term? It's right there in the title of the chapter.
Is it the enjoyer?
Yes, Purusha is also the enjoyer. Of course, is the controller also, because he thinks he's the controller and he thinks he's the enjoyer. And mainly this particular section, the enjoyer is like the most one. And Prabhupada uses it right there in the title. Nature, enjoyer, and consciousness. And these are the three things that Prabhupada. Nature is the Prakriti, Purusha is consciousness, but he is currently also in the mood of an enjoyer. But ultimately, the only enjoyer is the Supreme Lord. So, because the Purusha now is in an enjoying mode, yeah, Monil is also saying enjoyer. Yeah, Harshita is also saying. Thank you, guys. So, the Paramatma, the super soul, is that Purusha, that controller who is hidden, needs to be connected through the path of Jnana Yoga. Otherwise, yoga means connection. So the soul and the matter cannot connect. The problem is now we are we are constantly trying to connect with the matter, and that's why we are suffering in this material world. So the soul is trying to connect with the matter and enjoy the matter. However, the soul's original connection is with the super soul. So Gyan Yoga is to understand that through knowledge and to uncover that connection. And why Krishna is speaking about that? Because this knowledge offers liberation. So these are the reasons. But the main reason is Krishna asked for it, Arjuna asked for it, that what is Prakriti and Purusha? And that's what being explained in this particular chapter. And let's get into the verses. Today we are going to read more than what we usually read from the purports. So have your Bhagavad Gita by the side. It can be helpful. And let me just open the Gita. So hope you have your Gita as an access. So this is verse 20 from the chapter 13 of the translation and purport by translation. Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. So, what we are discussing here mainly is that the nature, which is Prakriti, the living entities who are the Purushas, assumed Purushas now, they are both are beginningless. But we have heard that the matter goes through what do you call creation and destruction. We see that right before our eyes also. Even our bodies age. And anything that is created actually eventually gets dumped in this world. So how come they're being told as beginningless? Because there seems like the material nature constantly goes through this cycle of coming together, making something, and then it disintegrates. So how are they saying it as beginningless? Any guesses? How is matter?
I'm sorry, you're asking, how is matter beginningless?
Yeah, matter beginning.
Because I was reading this and I was trying to understand it. Is it because Krishna, so matter is a living entity, similar like the living entity? And
no, because that is the difference. Matter is inert, unconscious. So it's not living, but it is being called as eternal. So why would it be eternal if it is, first of all, not living and it's constantly going through the cycle of creation and destruction? Then why would it be called as eternal?
Is it because Krishna creates it?
You're very close to it. You're very close to it. It's just the way you're explaining is slightly different, but it is very close. Anybody else? Why is the soul eternal or beginningless? Because it's the very nature of the soul. We have seen the soul's nature is that is Sat is eternality. And the nature, which is the what do you call the Prakriti, is what kind of energy it is. There are three kinds of energies we have seen in the past. One is internal energy, one is marginal energy, the soul. What is the third kind of energy? External energy. So this Prakriti is the external energy, and it's an energy of the Lord. So it can never be fully destroyed. It can manifest and we also heard the truth from Newton's mouth. Newton that energy can never be created or destroyed, can only be transformed. So it's the same thing that he is also saying. The Prakriti can go through formation and disintegration, but it remains in some way. So sometimes it is manifested as the world, sometimes it is taken back into Mahavishnu or Vishnu. So it's just a matter of manifestation, but they are eternally present. It's an energy of Krishna, external energy. So it can never be fully taken away. And they are also eternal. So that is why it is called as beginningless. It exists beyond the influence of the time energy as Pradhan. So I'm not sure if I helped understand or confused more. So the material nature and the living entity should be understood to be beginningless because they both are energies of the Lord. They are always present, eternal. So the soul is eternal. Matter Prakriti is also without a beginning, but is subject to transformation. It can take different forms. And in the Vedanta, this particular analogy is given. Sometimes the potter takes some mud and gives it a shape of a cup or a saucer or like a ball, all these different things. And if he does not, he can just mush it again and then put it back into his original lump of mud in which he is making everything. So that the external energy or as the matter is always existing. Sometimes it takes the form of a building, sometimes it takes the form of the world, sometimes it's all wound up, but the energy is there. It is subject to transformation, and the modes and their permutations result in the complex world. The transformations, what is this verse saying is the transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. Because of this world, we all have desires, and then there is three modes. Because of these combinations, and there can be various manifestation. And in one way, Prabhupada also, let's see what Prabhupada says in the purport. He also says both, of course. It's not that he also says, he said, that's why I'm saying material nature and the living entity both are eternal. In the second paragraph beginning, Prabhupada explains how both the living entities and the material nature have existed before this cosmos was manifested. Material nature was absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead Mahavishnu, and whenever it was required, it is manifested. So they may get transformed, but eventually it is existing as the energy of the Lord. Similarly, the living entities are also, sometimes they are conditioned and sometimes they don't want to serve the Lord. So they're allowed to enter into the material world. And when they are ready to serve, then they go back to the spiritual sky. So where they exist may change, but they are always eternal. They never die. The body dies. And Prabhupada also explains that we should know it with certainty from the descriptions of these few verses that all transformations and influences of material nature by the three modes are also productions of material nature. All transformations and variety in respect to living entities are due to the body. As far as spirit is concerned, living entities are all the same. So Prabhupada is saying all the difference that we have between each other is all because of the changes due to the body. We're born in a certain country, used to a certain kind of diet, we are used to a certain kind of culture, we're used to certain kind of living conditions. And because of all of these things, there is variety and there is transformations. However, as living entities, we're all the same on the level of the soul. So it does not really matter how, and the whole world, the whole iskcon and the whole Gaudiya world, we're all like completely wrapped up in this conversation. How did the soul enter into the material world? Here, Prabhupada is like almost very dismissive of the topic. Actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned within the material nature. He says, read this line, it really does not matter how these living entities or superior entities of the Supreme Lord have come in contact with material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead knows, however, how and why this actually took place. We all say God knows, like only God knows, or like God knows what is this person thinking. Prabhupada is saying about this topic, only literally God knows. Nobody else can really actually make it. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur also says it in one place. Even if Krishna comes to and explain to you, you won't be able to understand it until you make it to the other side of the existence, that you will be more clear why this happened. It's very hard to just make sense of it just by an intellectual understanding. So these two lines I found very interesting. Means that Prabhupada is like super dismissive of this topic, that it really does not matter. He says, you are here, you're undergoing a hard struggle for existence, and getting out of this place is more important than how to know that why you came here. And he's also wanting us to have faith that Krishna is saying, if you go out of this place to back to the spiritual world, you will never come back. He's saying, have faith in Krishna. And respond to that call of love. So this is what is discussed in this verse, that how the material nature is and the living entity, they both are understood to be eternal, and all the transformation and the modes, the goodness and the passion and the ignorance we are seeing, they're all the products of the material nature. All those things are all due to the material nature. And this verse also dismantles the idea that God is responsible for evil, because it is our desires which transforms this world. If we want to make this world into a very spiritual place, individually and collectively, we could do that. We saw how one person who had so much influence on the world, it's just one person's interest to spread spiritual consciousness. And to the extent each and every one in this world takes up to the spiritual consciousness, accordingly the material nature will transform. We all saw what do you call, a little glimpse of it during the pandemic, when people stopped messing around and were holed up in their apartments. Naturally the nature started replenishing itself very quickly. Imagine, the last 100 years have been the most brutal assault on the material nature in the recent history. The last 100 years have been the worst, how we have treated her. However, in a matter of few months, she was rebounding, and there were peacocks on the roads of Mumbai. There are what do you call, dolphins in the canals of Venice. It just matter of few months. It did not. The water got cleared in those canals, and people in Himachal started seeing the Himalayas actually, because they are a border state to Himalayas, but hardly they could see because of the pollution. It was always covered. So many places, immediately the material nature started getting better. She started recovering so quickly. 3 months is nothing for the amount of exploitation that she has gone through in these past 100 years. 3 months is nothing, and she has the ability to recover. We just have to stop getting into the way. So we are the ones who are messing up, and then we also blame God for the problems. Oh, why God did this? So what this verse is also saying is, how we desire, due to the soul's influence, the material nature transforms. Krishna has set it into motion. So it is between the material nature and the souls, a lot of what is happening here. It's, we cannot blame God for the completely responsible for evil. It's our making also. And taken out from the purport, all transformations and variety in respect to living entities are due to the body. So there's so much differences that we can see. That's all due to body. What we like, what we don't like, is all differences that coming from our own self. But as far as the spirit in terms of quality is concerned, living entities are all the same. So staying with the topic, that so now that we have seen the material nature is the cause of transformation in certain ways, the what do you call, the matter sometimes is manifested, is not manifested. If it is under mode of ignorance, it's acting in a different way. It's in modes of goodness, it is acting in a different way, and all that. So nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects. And we may think, oh, if it's all matter, it's, yeah, I am the one suffering it. The responsibility maybe is all with the transformation of the matter, but I'm the one who is suffering it. And that's what this verse is exactly saying. The nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in the world. So naturally, this question, who's responsible for suffering and enjoyment? So Kriti is an inert matter, material. So it is a cause of physical phenomena. Maybe, say, for example, there's going to be too much heat. It was the case in New York City last week. Your body was burning. Like, it's just whatever you could do, the body was constantly feeling like it's next to an oven, constantly. So the living entity is the cause of experiences like joy and sorrow. If we had the kind of consciousness, matras, that we have evolved consciousness where we have uplifted our consciousness, then even though there is an external inconvenience, we may experience it, but we may not be so affected by it. We'll go about, okay, it's fine, and still we'll be able to continue. We won't be too depressed, we won't be too irritated. Our day won't be like, my bad, this is such a bad day, I have such a bad mood, because we are being very much influenced. Bad things can happen around, but we're not saying you're being irresponsible or what do you call, in terms of aloof to the extent of being irresponsible. However, being above those things so that it does not distract you from your responsibilities. because Purusha is the cause of experiences, we can train our consciousness either to be disturbed by them or to not be disturbed by them. So nature provides the field, and we decide what kind of life we want. If you choose to go to gym and keep a healthy body, it is possible. What is the priority? Or we could just be lazy and just sit in our couch and watch TV or play games or watch social media. We could waste our time. And after 10 years, you'll realize, oh, what did I do in the last 10 years? Probably not much. Usually, whatever is we're forced to, we do that much. But what we could have actually achieved, the potential, sometimes it's very untapped because that's how we choose to live our life. So our suffering is not caused by God or fate, but by our misuse of independence. We all understand a lot of good things, or what's healthy, what's good for me, how can I feel more satisfied. Still, we sometimes don't choose to do them because we think, I know this is good, but maybe it won't make a big difference. I can just continue to be how I am. So this verse helps reconcile that divine justice with human suffering. So it's not that everything. There are some things which is destined. Maybe our age, maybe the way where we were born, what kind of how much wealth we had, what kind of looks we have. Those things were already destined, but it's not that somebody chose it for us. Somebody decided. It's our own karma from the past has been chosen in a certain way and it is given to us. So we haven't chosen our parents in an external sense. Oh, I'll be born to these two. No, we haven't chosen it, but we have chosen it by the way we have acted in the past. Through our karma, we have chosen a matching two matching souls to be our parents. In a way, we have chosen, and we are continuing to choose how we are acting. We don't have the details that gets assigned. Like we all buy sometimes flight tickets. We don't choose the seats. Sometimes they also make money by making you choose seats. But sometimes you just get offered, this is the seat you're assigned. So you go there and realize, oh, I'm sitting in 21C. You may not like the aisle seat, or you may not like the middle seat, especially. But sometimes you may get offered. So, however, we have chosen to fly with them. We have paid for it. And so this verse helps reconcile what is divine justice with human suffering in a way. So the nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects. Yes, there's so many things that is happening beyond our control, but the experience is within our control. So that is the topic which we will explore immediately after this quote from Prabhupada. In this Prabhupada's writing, according to one's desires and activities, material nature places one in various residential quarters. What do you think is the residential quarters? What Prabhupada is calling as residential quarters? Yes, Sundar?
Is it the body?
Yes, yes, bro. So it's so what do you call, like, poetically being called as residential quarters. So the being himself is the cause of his attaining such residential quarters and his attendant enjoyment or suffering. So we have got a certain kind of body, and there is a certain kind of enjoyment or suffering that comes along. So we have chosen that by our activities. Somehow we have been qualified to be in the human body. What if we were not in a human body? It will cause a different kind of an experience. There's so many different kinds of bodies in this world. So the nature has created those bodies, but we have the ones through our karma have become qualified for such a body, and now we are experiencing the suffering and enjoyment. The material nature is not responsible for that. The government has created prison, the government has created the world outside the prison, it's maintaining the city. So by our activities we choose whether we are outside or whether we go into the prison. So we cannot blame the government for placing someone in the prison. Of course the government can be corrupted, but in assuming it's all fair and just, that someone's actions choose where do they stay. Similarly, we have chosen this body by our past activities, and all the suffering and enjoyment that has come along is also our responsibility. And that's what is this topic. Is life happening to me or through me? Means, is that everything is being like, who's responsible for all of these things in my life? Why is this happening to me? So how do we understand based on this verse? So that Prakriti is the cause of the setup. Our body, sometimes the environment, the events that is happening. Sometimes the Prakriti is the cause, but the soul is the cause of the experience. How you feel and grow through those events is to the level of our consciousness. We will experience life differently. Same, different people take it differently. Somebody is affected by it, completely broken by it. Some people are completely devastated by it. Another people can hold themselves and look forward and be positive. Life happens to us when we let the outer situations dictate our inner state. We are human beings. We'll be affected. However, when we consciously choose our response, and our responses are when they are guided by Gita wisdom and the knowledge that we learn from Gita, by when we practice that knowledge, and when we accordingly act by that knowledge, then life happens through us. We choose. We don't just take whatever was destined, so called, and suffer it or enjoy it. We actually choose how you want to react, and that way, events may be out of our control, but not our experience. Yes, a lot of what happens in the world is out of our control. However, our experience is within our control. We can choose by how we respond. So that's what this verse is saying, that taking responsibility, that the material nature is could be the cause, but it is the living entity who is the cause of various sufferings and enjoyments in this world based on one's attitude. So now we see in the next verse that what is the reason for all these differences in different kinds of bodies? Why are there good species, bad species, like not a bad species, a lower species? There is a tree body or like an animal body or like a human body, the demigod body, so much differences in terms of facilities. Why is that difference exist? So the living entity in the material nature, this follows the way of life. This is a very famous verse in Bhakti also. It's memorizing in this memorizable section. So the living entity in the material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. That's the problem. The living entity is enjoying the three modes of nature. And the prize is, because of its association with the material nature, the prize is it meets accordingly, according to its the way it has enjoyed the three modes of nature, it will accept good or bad among the various species, because the modes of nature are three: goodness, passion, and ignorance, based on what we have enjoyed. If somebody has enjoyed mode of ignorance a lot, it's going to bring a different result in the future. Even in this life, it brings a different result. We walk around in the city, we see people who are jogging, and we see people are busy going to work. We see people who's distributing food, and we see people who are addicted to drugs and lying on the side of the road. I remember it was Friday. I had come very late back, and not even a single person who was crossing me was able to walk straight. They're all completely drunk. Not even, I was so surprised that most of these people were like so nicely dressed, but they were all like walking funny. They could not walk straight, actually. They were so drunk. And surprisingly, I saw a lot of Indians also. So the thing is, the way we choose our association, accordingly, we meet with good or evil. So when the more we interact with mode of ignorance, mode of passion, accordingly, our mood, our quality of life will be different. So that's why the same city, we see different kinds of people. Of course, there are so many problems in the system and all of that. Still, a poor person does not mean they have to be suffering. They can also live in mode of goodness. They also can choose their personal, make personal choices. Of money is a real concern. I do agree. Given in any circumstances, we can still continue to be in a better consciousness, but that would take spiritual practice. Without that, it would be very hard. And that's why you see usually philosophy works, the discussions, all these things, philosophical things happen in a society which is usually materially settled. We may have our struggles financially. Still, we are on a very decent level comparatively. It's not like someone on the road as a homeless. It would be very hard for them to discuss philosophy. Of course, they will be completely tuned in because they are seeing the real nature of the world. Sometimes in those difficult circumstances, we really can see what the world has to offer. The reality, the naked reality of the world becomes very clear. I'd seen this lady who used to drop by at the Bhakti Center a long time back, and she surely came from a good family by the way she conducted herself, and she had just become homeless. She had just turned into homeless. I don't know the reason. I was new to the country, so I did not understand this phenomena of becoming homeless. Especially in India, anyone who looks like a foreigner, like a white-bodied, they are considered like you're rich. And here it was a shock of my life to see that some person just walked around and they said they had just become homeless. And I was like, how does that happen? So I did not understand. But she continued to come for some programs, and we offered prasad. And After a while, she stopped coming. And suddenly one day I was in the railway station. I was going to the Broadway Lafayette station, and I saw her outside, and I called out to her, "Hey, Julie, how are you?" And she turned, she recognized, but her face has completely changed. She was now angry. For there's no reason, but I think that the hardships has just made her very angry. She was not like that the year before I'd seen her. The year of staying outside, having to struggle, her face had completely changed. She had become like, the health wise also she got affected, and there was a clear anger in her face and an irritability, because which is very obvious, and the struggle that is there in going through the winter in a city like that, a city like New York City. It's very hard. And she could recognize. So she could not even smile. She said, "Hi, how are you?" Everything with a very blank kind of an emotion, because you have seen the cruelest side of the world. So you just cannot believe there is goodness in the world, because you have seen the most hard phase of the world. So it's very painful to see that different entities, different people have to go through different circumstances in life. But when we have everything, if we can invest in our spiritual consciousness, we all may go through difficulties in our own way. We may not go through the same way, but everyone has a, what you call, a stock of good and bad reactions in life. So when everything is going okay or not, currently we have this opportunity to access to this knowledge, and also the ability to apply it in our lives. If we take that, and if we take to that opportunity and apply it in our lives, then when situations are not favorable, we'll be able to maintain a consciousness. It's hard to develop it afterwards. It takes a really good attitude. That's how Avanti, he makes it to the Bhagavatam because he had the right attitude during the most difficult times in life. It's very hard to develop. That's why he is part of the Bhagavatam, because he was an example. And whatever life threw at him, he just developed a good attitude. So I went way beyond the topic. So that's the soul actually meets with good and evil among various species, and because of its association with the material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, whatever we are enjoying, and accordingly we'll be experiencing life. So every association brings a consequence, and also the attachments we develop to things determines our future. So association, Sangha is the key influencer. So this verse is, the association with the material nature is the reason for the differences in the good and evil that we experience in the world. Karanam guna sangasya. If we choose to associate with more of goodness, our quality of life is surely going to be changed. Just as we change schools or jobs based on qualification, the soul gets a new body accordingly. Based on the qualification, we get a job, we get paid accordingly. So, similarly, based on the modes that we have attracted, the modes we have cultivated, accordingly, we'll have a future. So, every association has a consequence. Thank you. And thank you. So, this is the verse. And surely, but says one has to rise, therefore, above the three more material modes and become situated in the transcendental position. And he defines that is called as Krishna consciousness. What is Krishna consciousness? Is to actually keep us on the transcendental mode beyond the three modes. And that happens through the process of devotional service, and naturally is going to release us from the clutches of the material modes. And he says that is the process of Krishna consciousness, how to be relieved from the influence of the three modes gradually. And I really would like to complete this section at least today, so that we have 4 more verses. Let's go. So it in this body. So now that we have spoken about what is matter, what is soul, how they interact, and what is the reason for the soul being trapped in this matter, so we are seeing the hidden cause in this verse. Yet in this body there is another transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the super soul. So why is the super soul being discussed? All the question actually spoke about soul and the matter. Why is, we can think, oh, why is super soul being discussed here? Any thoughts? What's the role of the super soul in this whole thing?
Who just is witnessing through.
Yes, the super soul is the witness.
Is it to clarify that Krishna is not ordinary? He is why we should, I don't know. Is it just to clarify Krishna's greatness and how?
And the clue is there in the purport. Prabhupada writes that without the sanction of the supreme soul, the individual soul cannot do anything. Because the matter and the spirit are two completely different categories. Matter is unconscious and soul is conscious. And matter cannot actually interact with, so the soul cannot actually interact with the matter. It is being facilitated by the agent of supersoul. If supersoul does not allow, we'll not be able to fully manifest. Like all the elements of mind, intelligence, and false ego are all provided. And Krishna says in the 15th chapter, we will see it later, that I give intelligence. So he says, I reside in the heart of every living entity, and I give forgetfulness, remembrance, and I give all of these things knowledge based on one's karma, the past karma. He gives. Sometimes we have studied the best and then we go and sit in the exam and we cannot remember anything. Nothing comes through. Sometimes we use it for giving a class and then no, the mouth wouldn't open. Like there's nothing will come. It's just like you just feel like you're frozen. It just you feel like a stupid sitting there, and then that's when you realize, oh, you just cannot speak on your own. Like we can have some knowledge. Sometimes it just won't flow the way we want it. There'll be some kind of a block. You just feel like, oh, why? Immediately after the class, you feel like, oh, now I can speak. And so it's like very sometimes we are not the only what do you call like controllers. So the super soul also gives intelligence and sometimes not. And also without the super soul, the interaction between the matter and the spirit is just not possible. There are two categories like water and oil. It just does not stick to each other. They cannot just interact. They're two different things. So if the soul has to identify with the matter, then it needs the agent of mind, intelligence, and false ego. And also then the intelligence needs to be remembered. The soul has to sleep every night. And so in this way, the super soul is very much part of the system. Without the super soul, the interaction between the matter and soul is pretty much impossible. And that's why, and also how much we can handle or manipulate matter depends on our karma. Some people can become the presidents of the country. Some people it's hard to just remain a resident of the country. They become immigrants in a different country and all of these things. So it just, each one has a different ability to handle and manipulate material nature. The bigger you are, probably the worse you will have a future of the kind of manipulation of matter these people do. But still, for someone's words have so much potency that you could be dropped nuclear bombs and thousands and thousands of people could be killed. Someone's just one signature, someone's desire, okay, let this be, and it can happen in this world. And I may have so much, but if I don't have power, there is no difference. I may say so many things. There are so many social media warriors. They may go on the comment section and write a lot of things, but that's all their ability. They cannot actually do anything. But some people have great ability to manipulate matter and affect this world and make it happen. So accordingly, each one has a different ability based on one's karma. And super soul actually facilitates all of these things. Even those powerful people, not everything they think the way it all turns out. Sometimes even great people mess up royally. They may think something and something else can happen. Nothing is completely in our control. And even those things we assume is within our control, we cannot do them without the sanction and the assistance of the super soul. So though he resides in all bodies, he remains unaffected. It could be a dog's body, it could be a hog's body, it could be a human body. He remains in that body, but he is unaffected. This verse clarifies the distinction between the soul and the super soul, because a lot of people think the soul and the super soul are just same category. There is nothing like a soul and the super soul difference. But here this verse is very clear. Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as a super soul. And even if you think, oh, maybe it could be translated differently. But if you take to the Sanskrit, it's very clear. Bhokta, Shvaraha, Parama. So he is also Purusha, but he is Mahesh, Bharta. So all of these things are there. It's very hard. It will be almost a word jugglery to otherwise interpret this verse as referring to the soul and say that it's all of same category. Some people do it, but it's just like mind-blowing. How could they do it? Because the words are very clear. It says clearly Paramatma. It does not say Purusha. And it also uses the word Purusha and then says Paraha. Purusha Paraha means it's a superior Purusha. It's very clear in how Krishna is explaining this. And he says in the next verse very clearly, what is the result of knowing? What is the result of knowing all of these three? The soul, the super soul, and the matter. One who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. Because the more we understand of what is the soul and how it is interacting with the material nature, and the more we rise above the modes, then naturally we get liberated. He will not take birth here again, regardless of his present position. So, the knowledge that actually gives us freedom, realizing the difference between the soul, the material nature, and the super soul leads to liberation. So, to understand this body as separate from the soul and the soul as separate from the super soul, so leads to liberation. So, this is the Sankhya framework which could be applied to the bhakti. So, know the three and transcend the duality. So, liberation is not about renunciation alone, but also correct understanding. Liberation is not like anyone who has taken to a renounced order gets liberated. No, that's very external kind of an understanding. Just because someone takes to renunciation does not mean they are liberated. Liberation is not a location where you live. Okay, if you live at home, it's different. If you live in an ashram, it's different. No, liberation is not location. You go to and live in a forest in the Himalayas, or you live in the city. It's not a location, it's a realization. So anyone at any place, based on their consciousness, can experience or become qualified to be liberated. Yes.
Hare Krishna. So here it says, Krishna is saying that just a mere understanding itself is seems to be enough to guarantee that this person will not take birth here again. There is no mention of bhakti or anything else. So is that kind of because it's the path to bhakti, or is it just a concession that he gives for anyone who merely just understands the facts of what we are?
Actually, this section is Jnana Yoga. In that context, Jnana Yoga is about liberation. It's not about service. It's about liberation from the material nature. Oh, this world is a very place of suffering. I'm done with it. I don't want to be in this place of suffering. That's their attitude. The emphasis is on, I don't like this whole thing. I want to get out of this place. But if you see the Hare Krishna mantra, the meaning is, oh my dear energy of the Supreme Lord, please engage me in the service of the Lord. There is no, we are not saying, oh, the world is a place of suffering, so I want to get out of this, please help me. We're just saying, okay, I want to serve the Lord. And if I can be here, I can serve. I can go somewhere else to serve. That's fine. That's up to Lord Krishna. So, Mama Jan. So here we are speaking about Jnana Yoga. This chapter is about Jnana Yoga. Prabhupada can use and gives little explanations, which is also relevant and matching with Krishna conscious. But the central chapter is dealing with this Jnana Yoga, and it's all about liberation. It does not have a service element in there pretty much. Still, they cannot just think, Aham Brahmasmi, I am that Brahman. In terms of spiritual, there are people who think, oh, they are that supreme Brahman. They are not going to get liberated. So that's what is being explained in this verse, that understanding the difference between the matter, that Purusha can include two, both the living entity and the super soul. To understand the material nature and the three modes, sarva, that how these are the things which are moving and shaping everything. They will not become entangled in anything. They'll gradually extricate from that. Understanding means living by it. Not like a bookish knowledge does not give liberation. The knowledge that can actually free is the knowledge which is actually applied. So yati means to really know, is to actually realize that particular knowledge. So clear understanding of the material nature, the super soul, the individual soul, and their interactions makes one eligible to become liberated. That's what Prabhupada is writing. So there is no liberation here means that Brahman realization, because it is Jnana Yoga process and the focus is Brahman realization. And we are trying to, means Prabhupada may write in the purport a little bit Krishna conscious style, but the central topic is Jnana Yoga. By his personal endeavor in association with authorities, saintly persons, and a spiritual master, he has to understand his position and then revert to spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness by understanding the Bhagavad Gita as it is explained by the personality of God. Then it is certain that he will never come again into this material existence. He'll be transferred into the spiritual world for a blissful, eternal life of knowledge. So Prabhupada is also writing it from a Vaishnava perspective. From a Jnana Yoga perspective, in this verse, strictly speaking, it's only speaking about Jayate. Means if you read the synonyms, ha means again, ayate means takes his birth. That person does not take his birth again. What does that indirectly mean? He gets liberated. So the verse is only promising that part. It's not saying whether you will go to the spiritual world, because these people are not looking to go to the spiritual world pretty much. They are looking to go into the Brahman realization. But Prabhupada, he is writing a Vaishnava commentary, so he writes it. If a devotee understands all of these things and applies it to their knowledge, what they will get is different.
So I understand what you're saying, but when it says spiritual atmosphere, what do they mean by that? If that's not the spiritual world?
Yes, it is the spiritual world. Oh, where you're saying about spiritual atmosphere? Where is it written, the spiritual atmosphere?
In your right here in front of
In the slide. That is from the purport. That is from, I have taken from the purport. And Prabhupada is saying, turn to the spiritual atmosphere without being forced to return to this material nature. Actually, Brahman is also a spiritual atmosphere. The world is also a spiritual atmosphere. Obviously, the Brahman is also a spiritual atmosphere. But if you just strictly go by the verse itself, and if you see the word translations, it's only giving an direction. It's saying, Nasa, this person will not again take his or her birth. So again, not taking birth means liberation. In and out itself, it's not very clear. But Jnana Yoga usually focuses on Brahman, and Bhakti Yoga focuses on personal liberation into the spiritual world.
So
both are spiritual atmosphere.
Okay. So getting the liberation and going into the spiritual atmosphere, which is from the Brahmajyoti, they can then come back, can't they? Or no?
No, you go there, it is a liberation. It's eternal. Once you go, you stay there.
Really?
Yes.
But it's not service. You're not really enjoying anything, are you? It's not.
There is something called as Brahmananda, that the peace is the Ananda in that sense. It is compared that Brahmananda is hundreds of thousands of times better than what is experienced in the heavenly planets. However, from a Vaishnava perspective, it is useless because there is no personal interaction with Krishna and service to Krishna, which is a million times more than Brahmananda. Basically, you can buy you have like millions of dollars and you could have a certain kind of lifestyle, but you use it for a simpler, then you're like, oh, you could achieve much more with that. Why are you just settling in for this? You could get much more for what you have. So that's what, as a spirit soul, we have the greatest ability to be personally in service to Krishna. So in that comparison, the Vaishnavacharyas completely deride this Brahman realization because there is no connection with Krishna. The soul cannot be actually satisfied. And traditionally, they say the Brahman, anyone who gets liberated in Brahman does not come back. But Prabhupada does say that Brahman realization is also like people can get frustrated, but it is like quite rare. But those are also comparing to that almost like a suicide, like you're just like peaceful, but just understanding our own nature. Peace is, we actually want peace and we actually value peace. But can we just be peaceful? If everything is just always peaceful, it's quite boring after a while. Happiness is the nature of the soul. Peace is not the nature of the soul. Happiness is built on the foundation of the soul. Peace. So peace is required, but that's not all that we want. We want much more than that. However, it's again, different souls have different inclinations. So that is why there are different yoga processes that Krishna is giving and they can receive. So Krishna is like that the restaurant guy who has a lot of things in the menu, and then you ask him, what do you think you should order? See, everything is good in my restaurant, but I think you should order this. This is our best. So he's saying, okay, I have Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, but I think Bhakti Yoga is the best. And he answers that in 12th chapter. We just crossed the previous chapter. Arjuna asked, what is better, personal worship or impersonal Brahman realization? Krishna was clear like day and night in his answer. He clearly said, I prefer. Out of the two, the personal worship is best, and I prefer. And what Krishna prefers is the best. And he also said it's very hard. The second path, the impersonal Brahman, is very unnatural for the conditioned soul, because soul is usually used to form. To relate to something which is impersonal is very hard, and there is no reciprocation. We, with our personal effort, has to realize Brahman. Brahman does not come and reciprocate. But that's why Krishna says in 12.6 and 7, but if you become my devotee, I will come and deliver you. You do your part, I'll do my part. So it's a bhakti is a two-way relationship. With Brahman, this person is attached to the Brahman. Brahman is not eager about having this soul back in Brahman. But Krishna is eager to have us back in the spiritual world. I'm not sure if I exactly answered your question.
No, but it does. Yes, you did. Sorry. But it reminds me of the understanding of the heavenly planet.
Yes.
or the Christian mentality, where
Mhm.
they say they're going to go to heaven and never have to come back. Like,
But what do they do in heaven is not very clear. So the same way, of course, it's very different from the Brahman concept actually. Still, the Brahman conception, there is no aspect of service. But still, it's also a spiritual atmosphere. There is no doubt about it. So depending on the kind of practice one takes up, everyone will enter into a spiritual atmosphere if they understand these things and realize the Supreme Lord or the Super Soul and develop a service attitude. But the Jnana Yogis have to acknowledge that they are not Super Soul, they are not Paramatma, they are Atma subservient to the Paramatma. They have no option but to recognize that. So those people who say I am God will never get liberated. It's just not possible. So that realization is surely needed, the difference between the soul and the super soul. And let's go look at the last few verses. They are very simple, but actually important. You can read the purports also. That some perceive the soul. So first four verses 20, 21, 22, and 23, we discussed about what is nature, who's Purusha, and what is the role of Paramatma. And then in 24th verse, we saw the result of this understanding. And in 25 and 26, we are going to see what is the process one can actually take up to understand, to realize the super. So 25th verse speaks about dhyana in one can perceive the super soul within themselves through meditation, which is the usual path for realizing the super soul. But through cultivation of knowledge, also it's possible. Still others through working without fruitive desires. Even through karma yoga, some can actually perceive the super soul. So Krishna acknowledges the multiple paths, but actually sets the stage for bhakti as the ultimate. In the following verse, he will emphasize bhakti separately in a separate verse. Each of these paths still depend on surrender to the super soul. Without surrendering to the super soul, one cannot realize the super soul. So, in that sense, bhakti does not cancel other paths, it actually completes them. We usually think, oh, when we say bhakti is the best, that it's competing with the other paths. Rather, it's actually always helping other paths to complete them. So, this verse we can see some perceive the super soul within themselves through meditation, others through cultivation of knowledge, still others through working without fruitive desires. But all of these jnana yogis or yogis, they have to acknowledge the difference between the soul and the super soul. So that is an element of devotion. That's why in verse 8 to 12, in verses 8 to 12 in this particular chapter, when we discussed process of Jnana Yoga, it was included there of the process of Jnana Yoga. Without that, the Jnana Yoga will not be able to achieve perfection. The same goes for Dhyana Yogi, the same goes for Karma Yogi also. So taking from, oh, how did I not post Prabhupada's purport? So Prabhupada's purport, in here you can see that how he explains the translation. The Sankhya philosophers analyze this material world into 24 elements and they place the individual soul as the 25th element. And the Paramatma will become the 26th element. So without differentiating between the super soul and the individual soul, it's not possible. And in that way, because now they understand the super soul and its greatness, they could come to devotional service, but they may also choose to just realize the Brahman. And Prabhupada says, there are others who also try to understand the Supreme Soul by cultivation of knowledge. And there are others who cultivate the Hatha Yoga system and who try to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by childish activities. He almost discounts everything. Basically, he's saying, what is this? You could just be directly engaged in bhakti. That is his mode. And verse 27, Prabhupada speaks about, I'm sorry. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. And he's saying, okay, some people may not be conversant with all these things. They may not know this. Antaha means they don't know much about spiritual knowledge. They engage in worship. Upasate means worship. And they hear about the Supreme Lord. Just by their beginning to worship the Supreme Lord and hearing about the Supreme Lord, they just by the process of hearing, they will also cross over the world of death. They may not have engaged in karma yoga or dhyana yoga or bhakti yoga. Or jnana yoga. So what is the fourth process apart from these three? It's naturally bhakti yoga, right? So without taking the name of bhakti, he is explaining the process of bhakti by using the word upasana is not there in other processes in the way it is there within bhakti. He's clearly emphasizing bhakti as an alternative to all these other paths and dedicates a separate verse for that. And Prabhupada, how he writes, so even those who begin simply by hearing about the Lord can transcend birth and death. Shravanam is so potent. Shravanam means hearing, that it elevates even those lacking academic knowledge. A devotional hearing purifies consciousness. Hearing connects us to divine grace even before full comprehension. So there somebody told Prabhupada that he was in India and he was speaking to some guest, and he was speaking to the guest in Hindi. And all of his disciples at that point of time were Western bodied. So they didn't know Hindi. So imagine two older people sitting and speaking in a foreign language, and you have to listen to it for 2 hours. It'll be naturally like boring. And also these devotees were young, they were in their teenage or early 20s, so it was like they were just like restless. Some of them, they could just not sit. So one of them really got the courage to get up and go, and Prabhupada turned and said, "Where are you going?" So he said, "Prabhupada, I cannot understand what's going on here. You're speaking in Hindi and I cannot make it, so I don't think I means I need to stay." He says, "No, it's not about whether you understand or not. Just sit there. It's a spiritual vibration, it'll purify you." And it was very confusing to this devotee because it was not having a purifying effect, very apparently. He was like just feeling very bored. But he was training him that spiritual consciousness is not just about understanding the language alone. Being in a presence of a great soul itself is a vibration, because the other one was also his god brother and was also like a very advanced person, and Prabhupada himself is spiritually advanced. So he was like, you can just be here in this, you can bask in that energy. You may not sometimes understand everything, but the spiritual energy can actually purify if we have the right attitude. So hearing, and what to speak of hearing that knowledge from a great soul can actually help us connect. And how many of us can experience that just by reading Prabhupada's books? The speciality of his vibration is there in the book. Lots and lots of people in iskcon are introduced just by reading the books of Prabhupada. So hearing connects us to divine grace. So when we read Prabhupada books, it's as good as hearing. Access to the divine grace even before full comprehension. We may not understand everything, but still Bhakti can give us an experience of divine connection and grace just through the process of hearing. So as far as the common man, Prabhupada writes toward the end of the purport, as far as the common man, because he's speaking about comparing the common man with a Jnana Yogi who goes to the forest, a Dhyana Yogi who goes to a forest, a Karma Yogi who is dedicating his activities. A common man may not have all these abilities. It's not very easy for them to practice. As for the common man, if he is a good soul, then there is a chance for advancement by hearing. So if he's a good soul means what? If he has submissiveness to hear from a spiritual authority. That's all is the qualification needed. And this hearing process is very important. Lord Chaitanya, who preached Krishna consciousness in the modern world, gave great stress to hearing, because if the common man simply hears from authoritative sources, he can progress, especially according to Lord Chaitanya. If he hears the transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna, Hare, if he just hears that, he will be purified. And we are all sitting here because of that very principle. We are now trying to understand, oh, what is all this Gita about and what does this mean and everything. And still it's like kind of can be very puzzling. However, we not understanding knowledge does not mean that without not understanding it, we won't be able to experience Krishna. And that's why one of the titles I had put for the class's discussion was, do I need to know everything in order to understand? It's not necessary. If one engages in the process of hearing, and that process of hearing can help us experience Krishna even before knowing everything. So perfection in bhakti is not only at the end of the process, it's through the journey of throughout the journey also we can experience it to some extent. So thank you. And some of the lessons are, we are conditioned, but we are not condemned. It's not that you are sinful forever and you're like thrown into the hell forever. No, we are conditioned. This chapter is showing, yes, we are conditioned by the three modes of material nature, but it's also saying, no, you're not condemned forever. You're not like left alone to cry in the wilderness. The super soul is there. The process of yoga is there. And the more we understand, we can actually decondition ourselves. And that is one lesson we can see. And also true knowledge brings freedom. That the more one really understands, means true knowledge means also what we live, apply it. But true knowledge in itself can actually bring freedom. The moment I understand I'm not this body and a spirit soul in a real way, then it's going to bring freedom. And also it can bring freedom from the circumstances may be very hard, but I don't need to suffer. They say, right? Misery is compulsory, suffering is optional. There will be, like recently I was in a train going to a program, and The trains would just not move. 45 minutes stuck in one place. And it's very palpable. The frustration is palpable in the train, in the subway compartment. It was palpable amount of frustration in the air. And for me, I had not, means I was well in time, and I also had to read something. So I had the book with me. So I didn't mind that 45 minutes delay. So I could just sit there and read. And I could see, oh, and I had just heard a lecture by Radhanath Swami. He said he was speaking about traffic. And he said there were millions of people in Kumbh Mela, and it took hours to go from where he was to the place where he had to take a shower in the waters of the in the Tiriveni Sangam, where all the three rivers meet. And he said there are millions of people, and he said nobody was like frustrated. People were eager because they were grateful for this opportunity to be able to go and bathe in that holy time at the holy place. So it was not, they were not frustrated, they were not like exasperated, oh, so many people, how, why we are all stuck here, it's taking. They were just chanting, and they were all like eager, they were moving like snails, but they were okay. He said that place I did not feel frustration. He said today I was in the traffic jam, and everyone around was frustrated, because he said they are not grateful, so they are not peaceful. So nobody is grateful for a traffic jam. But in that, he was saying how in Kumbh Mela they were grateful for being there, so they were peaceful. They were just chanting and they were just absorbed. Yeah, it was taking time, but it was okay. So true knowledge means the right attitude brings freedom. So situations are not in our control, events are not in our control, but our experience is well within our control, internally speaking. So that is another part of this section. The soul is bound by the association with the modes, but liberation is always possible. So we are conditioned, but we are not condemned. Yeah, how, and we can always think, how can I deepen my understanding of the difference between matter and spirit in daily life? And also what kind of influence we have on our, what kind of modes influence we are letting on ourselves. So between the stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response, not just our response, our future. What we are choosing is not one response to that situation. We're choosing future with every choice. So thank you. And Prabhupada is writing that true knowledge is seeing the distinction between the soul, the nature, and the super soul. So next week, we'll complete this chapter by discussing verses 27 to 35. It's a bonus topic that was not asked by Krishna. Like many times you ask something and I end up speaking something extra. So Krishna is also doing the same thing, or rather, he knows what is the best. I know, I don't, for the lack of knowledge, I sometimes say so many things. Here, Krishna gives this because this last topic, even though Arjuna has not asked about this, in order to complete all that knowledge that he gave so far. So that's seeing with the eyes of knowledge that we will discuss next week. And